without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Mei-Ling Tapp, who is going to introduce our speaker. Mei-Ling?
Everyone, my name is Mei-Ling Tapp, and I'm a student here at Georgia Tech in Material Science and Engineering, and I'm also a member of the inaugural graduate leadership development program. Our sponsors for this afternoon for the impact session are the Institute for Leadership and Entrepreneurship, the College of Management, the Parker H. Ritchie Institute for Bioengineering and Bioscience, the Health Systems Institute, the Wallace H. Culture Department of Biomedical Engineering, and the H. Milton Stewart School of Industrial and Systems Engineering. The video recording for this afternoon's presentation is provided by ePage Text Lecture Recording Service. Constructing a plan to increase a company's market capitalization from $1 billion to $60 billion over the span of a decade would be considered an impossible task by some. However, for our speaker today, highly acclaimed for his leadership practices, that was no mystery. Our guest today is none other than Bill George, Professor of Management Practice at Harvard Business School since 2004. He is also the former Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Medtronic. Medtronic is a global leader in medical technology, and at the company, Mr. George served as President and Chief Operating Officer in 1989, was Chief Executive Officer from 1991 to 2001, and Chairman of the Board from 1996 to 2002. Mr. George is also a best-selling author with 4 best-selling books: 7 Lessons for Leading in Crisis, True North, Finding Your True North, and Authentic Leadership. He's been named one of the top 25 business leaders of the past 25 years by PBS, Executive of the Year 2001 by the Academy of Management, and Director of the Year 2001 to 2002 by the National Association of Corporate Directors. Mr. George's articles have appeared in the Wall Street Journal, Business Week, Fortune, Harvard Business Review, and numerous other publications. Mr. George received his Bachelor of Science in Industrial Engineering with high honors from Georgia Tech, and this weekend he is here to celebrate his 40th reunion. He received his MBA with high distinction from Harvard University, where he was a Baker Scholar, and has also been bestowed with honorary PhDs from Georgia Tech and Bryant University. At the end of today's session, we encourage you to stay behind for a book signing event and light reception. Now please give a warm Georgia Tech welcome to our guest, Mr. Bill George.
Thrilled to be back. Every time I come back to Georgia Tech, it really feels like coming home, because this is a place where, as a young 18-year-old, I came 830 miles away from my hometown in Michigan, and I really found myself. I had these great dreams of being a leader, except in high school and junior high, I was never selected for anything. So finally, in my senior year, I put my hat in the ring to run for president of senior class, and when the votes came in, I lost by a margin of 2-1. So it was pretty clear at that point that the guys and gals in my high school class didn't recognize what a great leader I was. So I thought I'd start all over, not recognizing wherever you go, there you are, and I was going to take myself with me. So I came to Georgia Tech, and I said, this is where I can be a leader. So I came down here and I ran for office 6 times in my freshman and sophomore year, lost all 6 times. So now I'm 0 for 7. So if you want to see a real loser as a leader, there's one. So one of the great benefits of my life is some of the seniors in my college fraternity, Sigma Chi, took me aside and said, Bill, no one's ever going to want to work with you, much less follow you, because you're moving so fast, you really don't take time for other people. And you've got a lot to learn, and they gave me a lot of help. And so I set out on a course of what I might call self-development and trying to overcome some of my shortcomings. And fortunately, I was later able to I was selected for a number of leadership roles here on the campus and in the graduate school. But I think I would say that was the experience where I was a bit lost, more than a bit, and really found myself. And I really attribute that to my experiences here at Georgia Tech. And I was just thinking also how diverse this campus has become, because when I came here we had 5,000 students, of which we had 50 females, and the rest were all males, and they were all white, and a few occasional people from Asia, and occasional people who would come in from Puerto Rico, from Cuba, because at that time Castro had run a lot of people out of Cuba and we had students. And I remember with the pride we all felt, I remember Ed Harrison, the president, called us over to his office, a group of student leaders, in the spring of my freshman year. We were kind of a mix of different students, and explained to us the plan and his objective of make Georgia Tech the first school in the South to peacefully integrate and bring African Americans into the school. And I remember that, I was talking to my friend Bill Selby back here, and I remember that when he matriculated that year, that first day, and what it was like and how peaceful it was and how wonderful it was. And I think everyone here thought, hey, this is great. Meanwhile, George Wallace is standing at the University of Alabama saying just the opposite. Like no one will ever enter these doors. So some of you are older, remember those times. But how amazing it is. I had the privilege of coming back last December and delivering the commencement address. Oh, by the way, in those days, the graduate school was very small at Georgia Tech, less than 500 people. And I'm giving the commencement address for the MD, master's students and PhDs, and I think there were 780 that got their graduate degrees. That was just the midterm commencement, and it was pretty amazing to me to reflect on how outstanding, how diverse, and how global the school has become. So we've come a long way. So I had a student in class say this to me on Monday. He said, basically some things never change. This is the way kind of people are. They discriminate, they don't like us for this, that, or the other thing. And I said, I think you really need to step back a little bit and look and see what happens over a period of time. So I shared with the class some of my experience about how much things have changed and how we break things down and what opportunities are if you set your mind to say, this is the best opportunity we have. So, back in those days, I came here, I went to engineering probably because it was the post-Sputnik engineering era, and they were saying those days you're better in math and science than you are in English, which I certainly was. I wasn't very good in English. You have to be an engineer. So, but President Kennedy then challenged us my freshman year, could we put a man on the moon? Now, he had no idea how we were going to do that in 1961. And now that seems routine to all of you looking back, but I can tell you we had no idea how we were going to do it. And 8 years later, sure enough, we had a person on the moon. And now we have lots of people that have gone to the moon. I'd like to suggest to you that we need to do something equally more radical, and that's turn this economy from a consumer spending economy where we spent consumers across this country into debt, into an innovation economy. Because as I look around the world and around the United States, and I've had the privilege of visiting most of the leading countries in the world at one point in time or another, there are a lot of smart people in this world. There are a lot of great educational institutions in Asia and in Europe. There are a lot of good business people. But I tell you, and there are a lot of, I've taught postdocs, and right after I left Medtronic in 2002, I taught postdocs at one of the leading technical institutions in Europe, in Lausanne, Switzerland. They're very smart people. But I tell you, there's one unique thing that goes on here. I don't know if it's in the water or what, but there's nowhere in the world where we have the innovative, creative, entrepreneurial spirit that leads to forming new companies and providing great basis for innovation, creativity, and frankly, job creation and wealth creation, not just for the people that founded them, but for people throughout the organization. And I'd like to suggest that is the future of this economy. Without offending any of you, manufacturing T-shirts, no matter how we try, is not coming back to North Carolina. We have to evolve our economy to things where we're great and play to our competitors' strengths. And this is an area where, as smart as people are in other parts of the world, I have great respect for the Indian Institute of Technology and some of the technological institutions in Europe and in Germany. But no one has the courage to be creative like we have. And that's why you see so much creativity coming out of this country. But we've also been on the verge of losing it. And, we've seen this great generation of leaders that came out of what I call the space age, when we put a person on the moon, who were inspired by that. People like Bill Gates and Arthur Levinson, who built Genentech into the world's leading biotech company, and Andy Grove, who built Intel into the world's leading semiconductor company when he was losing it to the Japanese competitors. And so I'd just like to ask you, which of you is going to stand up and be one of those great leaders of the future and really make a difference? Believe it or not, as hard as we've worked and the world's moving so much faster today, everything accelerated. But it still takes a long time to to have a breakthrough drug. You can produce a drug, it's me too, but it takes 12 to 14 years to take a biologic drug and turn it into an approved product. It takes a long time to create a new computer. You know, I saw some of the early work going on the internet at MIT in 1979, you know, and now we have the kind of dreams they had, like search engines. That was 30 years later. So it takes that kind of time, but it also takes that kind of commitment. Because 25 years ago, companies like Microsoft and Intel and Google and Genentech and even Walmart barely existed. They did, they were a dream in someone's imagination. Medtronic was a very, very small company in those days. Today it has 38,000 people. Walmart has 2 million people. And you think of Walmart being creative, but yes, they've used the world's greatest logistics system to bring great value to consumers throughout the world. And by the way, they have employed 2 million people in the United States and around the world. But we're in the midst of a global financial meltdown. I think everyone's well aware about it. And it's a little bit like Hurricane Katrina. You know, the economists are telling us, and they're very definitive now. They told us 2 months ago the recession will be over by September. Now they're declaring the recession ended in September 2009. Well, if you use their metrics, that's true. Stock market hit back, Dow Jones is at 10,000. You know, we're not going to have financial institutions melting down. I'm a serve on the board of Goldman Sachs, and last year it was like we had one a week. You know, we had 3 in 1 week. We had Lehman Brothers, Merrill Lynch, and AIG all went out of business the same week. Citigroup, 2 weeks later, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, all went out of business. And it just kept, one after another was something. Even Great Wachovia went out of business. You know, one of the greatest banks in the Southeast for many, many years. And so I think we're through that. But it's a little bit like saying, you know, the weather forecasters saying, you know, the hurricane, the eye of the hurricane, we've passed through the hurricane and the weather's settling down. Yeah, but who's going to deal with the aftermath? Who's going to deal with the fallout? Today in this country, if you count, which I do, people who have stopped looking for jobs and no longer drawing unemployment because they can't find one, or who've gone from as an engineer from making $80,000 a year to a part-time job where they're making $15,000. If you count those people as unemployed or underemployed, the number is 17% of American people are unemployed. And among younger people, among ethnic groups, it's much, much higher than that. We're dealing with figures in the 40% range. So we have a real jobs crisis. And so I'm rather have a negative reaction to the economists telling us that it's all over. The problem is this. We've become a society of instant gratification and instant rewards. Look, if I could create a company, which I know I had a number of students who did this in the past, try to create a dot-com company, turn it around, make a lot of money in 9 months, and move on to something else. I'll tell you, I don't think we're going to do that with anything that's breakthrough technologies. It's just not going to happen. As fast as the internet moves and everything else, it still takes time. And I think we need to step back. You know, I heard a great debate on the faculty at Harvard Business School between a finance professor and an innovation professor about was financial innovation real innovation, and was it equivalent to technological innovation? And I have to tell you bluntly, I come out on the side of no. It became a lot of financial engineering that came back to bite us. You may think a credit default swap in a $55 trillion market is very impressive until you start taking trillions of dollars of write-downs because of that financial innovation. So it did not create jobs. In fact, it cost a tremendous amount of jobs, and we're dealing with that fallout, which was no fault. A lot of people getting hit. So where do we go from here? I was coming back last winter from the World Economic Forum in Davos, and I sat down and I was on a long flight, one of these 10-hour flights coming home, and thinking about what can we learn from this. And so I started jotting down some notes that I turned into an article and eventually turned to this book, 7 Lessons for Leading in Crisis. And when you look at these lessons, you're going to say, well, that's obvious, you know. I mean, doesn't anyone have to? Lesson number 1 is face reality, starting with yourself. Why is this so hard? Well, the reality is that we don't do these things. Why do great leaders not do this? Why do they cannot face their reality? But I do say, before I go into some of these lessons, I want to say that I think crisis is a great opportunity. There's an old English saying that a smooth sea never created a skilled mariner. And it's really in a crisis that you find out what you're made of. My first job I always wanted to be a general manager. Yes, I was an engineer, but I knew I wouldn't be a great engineer. So I really wanted to use my technical background to get into general management. So after I got out of business school, I went and worked in the Defense Department for 3 years, and then into a staff role as head of long-range planning for a company called Litton Industries, which is one of the great conglomerates of the 50s and 60s. And I had a chance, my boss gave me a chance to be assistant general manager of this little $10 million division that made microwave ovens. And at that time, we were just getting ready to go into the consumer microwave oven business, and I put together the strategic plan to do this, but the business, within a matter of months, was hitting some hard rocks. So I was sent up to Minneapolis for a year. We've now been there 25, we've been there 40 years. But I was sent up for a year, and to see, the night I was packing my bags to move to Minneapolis, there was an announcement on the radio that the Surgeon General of the United States has just declared that microwave ovens may be hazardous to your health. So here we are, this little business, 200 people, 10 million in sales, selling to restaurants and vending companies, no consumer sales. We just shipped our first 1,000 consumer ovens, and there was a question about where they sit. And there were pending federal standards, but there were no federal standards. And so we were convinced they were safe, that there was still a big safety factor built into them. And so I will never forget, about the third day I was there, our corporate executive vice president comes wheeling into town, and he sits down, and I'm the young kid making the presentation at age 27 to him about why these ovens are safe. And he said, look, don't present me with all these data. We've decided we're just going to recall all 1,000 ovens you've made and bring them back. And I was kind of but. He said, nope, we're just going to do it. You know, he probably saved the business with that decision. He didn't need a great deal of analysis. He knew that this was not a stable design. We didn't have a robust design, and we needed to go back and redesign it so we could replicate it and it could meet the toughest federal standards, which had a 10,000 times safety factor built into them. And I remember talking to the guy at the FDA, and he was telling me, Mr. George, I'm actually doing you a favor. And I thought that was the last thing. I thought I was ready to kill the guy because he'd been our nemesis. And, you know, he was right. He was doing us a favor. Because he said, I want to get to before your market gets out there, you got millions of products out there, and then you're going to have a real problem. And he was right. And we had to go back many nights. I went into the factory at 3 a.m. to see could we start production when the workers came in at 6:30. And several days we couldn't. We had to send them home because we didn't have a design that was ready to go. And I learned a lot about design, about making changes on the fly. And, you know, you correct one problem, create two more, except you learn about the two more later. And the pressures you're under and how you deal when you're in the spotlight, because every night there was nightly news, there was information on this. We were being challenged. But I learned more in that crisis that helped me 20 years later when I wound up at Medtronic. We had similar issues, you know, maybe not quite that severe, but quite similar issues. Dealing with the FDA, safety question, regulatory question, how you deal in the spotlight when people are challenging, when people are harmed by your products. And so I learned a lot from that. So I just say to every one of you, get out on the firing line, put yourself on the line, have that opportunity to deal. Don't just stand back and be an observer of the scene. Many of you are athletes. You know, I'd ask you the question, would you rather watch a great football game, I have to coach soccer, a great soccer match, or would you actually rather play the game? And I hope you're going to say you'd rather play the game, because it's no different in leadership. You got to get down on the field and play the game and take your risks, take your lumps, make your mistakes, because you learn so much better from your own mistake than you do from analyzing someone else's. You really, because in the head, you can analyze. Our students at Harvard are great at analyzing other people's mistakes. And I always say, what would you do if you were in that situation? You know, it's not quite as easy when you're down on the playing field and you're making the mistakes. And so that's why I said lesson number one is to face reality starting with yourself. Richard Full, the CEO of Lehman Brothers, which is a 135-year-old corporation that led it into bankruptcy after a long line of leadership in that company, was asked 9 months later, Mr. Full, if you had it to do all over again, what would you do differently? He said, you know, I wake up every night thinking about that. 2 in the morning, I'm thinking about what would I do differently. You know, if I had to do all over again, I wouldn't change a thing. Think about that. How many of you would like to take a test over? How long you would like to have that opportunity to do it all over again? Huh? I think it just shows the inability to look yourself in the mirror and say, I made a mistake. I remember when I first went to Medtronic, and I'd been there, I was not number one, I was in number 2 role, 1989, 1990, and I appointed reorganized the world of the company and appointed the first president of Europe. And I felt like our European operations were not very disciplined. And I put a Dutchman in charge who was really a great bottom line businessman. And this guy knew the business. He delivered very, very well. And 4 months later, he was going strong. And our general counsel, chief lawyer, and the head of internal audit came to my office, and he closes the door. They close the door. I tell you, you always know you're in trouble when a lawyer comes to your office and closes the door. And we were in trouble. And they explained to me that this head of Europe in the previous job had been running a subsidiary of Medtronic. Medtronic acquired 4 years before, had run their bribery scheme through Swiss bank accounts on behalf of Italian doctors. And he might have been getting kicked back himself. And so I called him up and asked him to fly over from Belgium, where his headquarters was, and confronted him with this, showed him the statements that everyone had to sign for compliance with Medtronic ethical standards. He immediately said, "That's the problem with you Americans. You're always trying to impose your standards on us Europeans." And I said, "No, John, these are not American standards. These are Medtronic standards. We have one standard worldwide. You're going to have to leave the company." Now, that was very easy. Terminating him was not pleasant, but it was not hard. You know what was hard? It was looking at Bill George in the mirror and say, "Why did I appoint this guy?" I had some signals. Maybe, people were questioning how solid this guy was in terms of his values, but I didn't check him out. So I had to go back to the board of directors. I had to go to my own executive committee. I was the new kid on the block, and explain that I'd made this mistake. But, that's the hard part, is looking yourself in the mirror and admitting mistakes. It's a lot easier for me to correct your mistakes than it is to correct my own. But I think that is really what we all have to learn from crises like this, is how to deal with our own mistakes. And I think the only way you can deal with that, when you're new, I've been in so many new situations where I didn't know a fraction as much. I didn't know anything about the medical business when I came to Medtronic. I used to say to myself, "Bill, don't be Atlas. Don't try to carry the world on your shoulders. Build it, work with your team, and you better make sure that everyone in your team is a lot better than you are, because you don't know anything about this business, and they're the ones who are going to teach you." So you let people that really know, even though they may be an engineer 6 levels to 5 levels down the organization, teach you about the business. But the third, until you can't solve a problem until you get to the root cause. The root cause of our current financial meltdown, if we want to acknowledge it or not, is our leaders have been practicing short-termism. You can say it's greed, but greed has existed throughout all time. But it's playing the short-term game. And in that process, we've destroyed great corporations. I grew up in Michigan. When I was a kid growing up, the number one company in the world was what? General Motors, right? Bankrupt. Okay. The other great company was the telephone company, they used to call it. American Telephone, called AT&T. AT&T was essentially went out of business, was sold off to one of its own subsidiaries, Southwestern fell. Sears Roebuck was a great retailer. It went out of business. Why? Because its leaders practice short-termism. And I think we're paying a huge price for this kind of short-term approach. And our whole economy is so caught up in it. I'm just saying to you, we can't get there from here. Our stock market rewards short-termism. I was doing a board seminar for a company called Biogen Idea. Biogen's one of the nation's 5 leading biotech companies, behind Amgen and Genentech. It's been under attack from Carl Icahn, who's a ultra investor. This is the 5th biotech company he's invested in, and then he immediately started lobbying to get his people on the board. When he lost the first proxy fight, he won the second, and he placed 2 of his people on the board. And so I went to the first board meeting the first hour after these new people are on the board. So I just put the question to him, what's the name of the game? Are we going to play this for the long term? Or are we going to play for short term, monetizing the value, basically selling the company off? He's already forced 2 companies to be sold off, Advamed and Implome. If you think these kind of companies are the future of this country, which I do, and the future of the industry, which I do, it takes a long time to build them. Amgen, Genentech, those companies have been built in the last 25 years. They've emerged in the last 10 as great companies, but it took that first 10 to 15 years to really build them up. Biogen's been around for about 20 years, and it's really threatened. And so I see this as a real issue. So one of my lessons is, 4th lesson is get ready for the long haul. These things take a long time. And I think we as people are going to have to say, we're so committed to this goal that we're willing to devote that much of our time. My wife Penny is sitting down here. started 12 years ago trying to change medicine. I remember she told me this. I looked at her and I said, gosh, I'm in the field. How are you going to do that? And she said, you don't believe in me, do you? And I said, yes, I do. She's devoted herself to changing medicine, not to look at a person as a diseased liver or diseased breast or a diseased heart, but look at the whole person. And at first people kind of, said, well, that's kind of frou-frou stuff. Now all the science and research is coming out to say that the human body is the world's greatest healing machine ever created, but we got to get it working with itself. And by doing that, the body can heal. But it's not just a question of doing surgery, it's a question of allowing people to be healthy. And so she's now dedicated herself to preventive medicine, preventive health. But, we can't, that's going to take a long time. This is not an overnight tour. She's not dedicated to doing this for 20 years. You're not going to get there from here. And I want all of you to think about what are those great challenges you're going to take on? What are the things you're going to take on to really make a difference in your life? One of the people I teach a case on is a woman named Wendy Cobb. Wendy, at age 22, was out at a conference. She's a senior princeton. She says, why don't we have a teacher corps like the Peace Corps? Why is it young children in the inner city can't get a decent education? I went to a good school. I got a good education. It doesn't seem fair that they don't get a good education. And so she created Teach for America. And she went through a very rough time at the 5-year part, but today it's the most innovative education program in the last 25 years. Because she's dedicated herself to that. She's been at it for 17 years, and she's more inspired now than ever before. You know why? Because she has a passion. She didn't bring any particular skills to it. She wasn't smarter than anyone else. She didn't have any education background. She had no leadership experience. She had no management training. She had a passion. So what's your passion? What do you really want to do to make a difference in the world? The Chinese symbol for crisis is made up of 2 characters, danger and opportunity. We've been focusing on the danger side. Everyone's kind of hunkering down and saying, we just got to get through this thing, and then that storm will pass. No, we can see the opportunity, because in a crisis, it's your best opportunity to create transformative change. Machiavelli once wrote, and I'm not a great fan of his, but he once wrote, never waste the opportunities of a good crisis. Now Rahm Emanuel's picking this phrase up and using it a lot, but it was Machiavelli who said it long before Rahm Emanuel came along. But crisis is an opportunity. Can we use this to transform our country? I think we need to. Jack Welch, when he took over GE in 1981, he actually created a crisis that he saw coming. He accelerated it for GE. He saw GE as a big lumbering company, now much different than General Motors, okay? With lots of bureaucracy, all these layers, huge staff groups, and not very competitive and carrying a lot of bad businesses. And he said, I see a global competitive crisis coming in 10 years, and we're going to get ready for it. And he did. And a lot of people hated what he was doing. They called him Neutron Jack for taking people out, stripping down, but he turned GE into one of the great performance machines in the business world. And it did an amazing job. Now his successor, Jeff Immelt's focusing on things like predictive medicine, predictive health, and trying to transform energy with renewable source of energy like wind power and solar power. Welch saw the crisis coming. His competitors like Siemens, which is another great company, is a great company from Germany, didn't do this. And they've gone through CEO after CEO, still being very bureaucratic. A great company, but not able to compete on that kind of performance basis. And same with Philips, which keeps trying to transfer, but Welch saw the crisis and he actually went after it. I've mentioned General Motors a couple of times, but General Motors had many opportunities that they wasted. Once they got, about 15 years ago, they got Congress to pass a law that said it limited Japanese imports coming into the country. And what did they do? Did they get their car line in line so they could compete with the Japanese? No. They raised their prices, and the profits went up. Stock market loved it in the short term. Guess what Toyota did? Guess what Honda did? They retooled their car line so they could compete with these high tariffs the U.S. was imposing. And at the end of that 3-year period, they were much more competitive than General Motors. Now, so it wasn't until General Motors actually declared bankruptcy that they woke up and went through bankruptcy this past summer. On the other hand, you had Ford brought in somebody from the outside of Detroit, Alan Mulally from Boeing, who would run an aerospace business. Mulally comes in within 90 days takes out $24 billion in debt, mortgages the entire company, and people thought, boy, he must be in real trouble. And they asked him why he wanted to do it. He said, I'm just getting ready for the crisis that's coming. And he also got a 3-year head start on redesigning his automobile line. If you check the numbers, you'll find out as tough as this period's been, Ford's coming through it just better than any automobile company, and he's got that head start. And by the way, he hasn't taken any funds from the federal government. He's refused funds. He said, I don't need any, we're not going bankrupt, we don't need any funding, we're independent, because he took that initiative. So think about how you take a crisis and turn it into an opportunity. I say go on offense. There was this company that we thought was great that helped me learn about computers called Apple. Some of you heard of Apple? I tell you, they were almost out of business a few years ago. 15, 18 years ago, they fired the founder. They brought in a business executive from PepsiCo. He forced out Steve Jobs, sent him off into the wilderness, created Pixar. He created 11 award-winning animated films. Meanwhile, Apple goes to CEO after CEO after CEO, and they go down, down, down. Finally, Steve Jobs comes back. He brings out the iMac, which is a pretty exciting line of computers, particularly for consumers. He can't budge his market share. It never gets above 3%. So what's he do? He transforms his entire company. He brings out something most of you who are high-tech people would look at the iPod and say, you know, what is this? This is not a big deal. You know, it transformed the entire recorder industry. Then he brings out iTunes. You know, CDs are going out of business because of iTunes and iPod right now because he transformed the entire industry. I know for a fact, I was at Microsoft about a dozen years ago, and they've been working for since the mid-90s on coming out with a mobile phone. Really committed to it. Have you seen a Microsoft mobile phone? Apple comes into the game late after Motorola and Nokia and Samsung. These people are battling it out, and all of a sudden they show up and they take over the market with the iPhone because he understood human factors, he understood use of color, he understood the human interface. In each of those cases, he understood the human interface, he understood the ultimate technology is delivering it with simplicity to the user. So the user didn't have to learn any computer programming language. That was how I learned computers. I couldn't learn on the Apple II because I didn't want to learn all the programming language, which I learned when I worked for IBM. So when I got the Macintosh, it was all natural. So think about how he transformed the company. And he took this terrible crisis. The company was almost going out of business. A lot of people thought they were, had to be sold off. He transformed the entire company by seizing the opportunity. So think about your own career and what you're doing to seize those opportunities, and think about what we can do as a country. There are many other examples of doing that. Sam Palmisano is doing it at IBM, basically taking them out of the computer hardware business, where all their business came from that, and putting them in the systems business, and they're doing remarkably well. I served on the board of Novartis, one of the world's leading pharmaceutical companies, Swiss company. Dan Bessel, the CEO, saw that things were changing, and he actually moved the research headquarters and the research team of Novartis from Basel, Switzerland, where his headquarters was, to Cambridge, Massachusetts, where you could get a lot of scientists right there along the Charles River from MIT and Harvard and other Americans who wanted to come there and work in that environment, and other people from all around the world wanted to work in that environment. He got enormous heat in his home country in Switzerland. They called him a traitor, they called him everything. And we asked him on the board, Dan, when do you know if this is a good investment? You want to put $2 billion a year into this thing for the next 10 years. How do we know it's going to be a good investment? He said, give me 12 years. Okay? That's a long-term thinking. Now he's doing some remarkable things in treatment of disease, really tough disease. Brought in a chief cardiology from Harvard Medical School. But you know what he also did? He also saw that the world, if you want access to drugs, is not just about patented medicine. So as ferocious as Novartis is about defending their patents, he created a very large generic drug business. And he acquired a series of companies. Now Novartis, under a company called Sandoz, a subsidiary, is the second largest generics drug company in the world, because they can provide access with quality. So they use Novartis quality standards in providing access to people in China, Malaysia, and in Georgia, and in Africa, and in Europe. And so he saw that coming. Rather than fighting it, he took advantage of that. He also saw about 5 years ago, and I must say as a board member, I questioned this, he bought a mediocre vaccines company because he saw the future of vaccines. And I had some reservations about it because I didn't think much of the company. He was absolutely right. Did he see the swine flu coming? No. He saw vaccines as an area of great importance. So guess who's going to be first to market this month, right now, already delivered the first H1N1 vaccines, Novartis. Now, they aren't the only one. GSK and others are out there. But the point is, here's a visionary who thinks about, it's really about the end user. It's about the health of the patient. All those people have the same characteristics. What does the person receiving it really want? So if you want to be successful in business, don't focus on your shareholders. That's the surest way to destruction. If you want to be successful in business, the way you're successful is you create greater value for your customers than anyone else. If you want to be successful in medicine, you create great value not for the doctors, but for the patients. If you can do that, I assure you that everyone will benefit. Your employees, because that's what motivates them. Your shareholders will benefit in the end, and surely your customers will benefit. If you think about every one of these stories I'm talking about, the CEOs were motivated, the leaders of these organizations, the creators were motivated not by creating short-term shareholder value, and not even long-term shareholder value. That was the outcome. They were dedicated to a principle of service, of really empowering their people to step up and serve their customers, their clients, their patients, or whomever you want to have at the end of that you envision as your service. So what can we do as a country, and then I'll wrap up and take questions. What can we do as a country to get our economy to go on offense? I've given you some examples of companies that are going on offense. What can we do as a country to get off the defense? We're on the defense now. How do we get on the offensive side? I said this to the head of Goldman Sachs. He said, oh, you want us to play offense and defense at the same time? I said, that's exactly right. I used to coach soccer, and I always told our young players as youth teams that, the best way to keep the other team from scoring is to be down on their end of the field and shooting at their net. We need to do that as a country. We need to go on offense. We don't need to fear the Chinese. We don't need to fear India. We don't need to fear Russia. We don't need to fear anyone. We just need to play to our strengths and use those. And we know what our strengths are. We know our competitive advantage in innovation and technology and creativity. But we also are learning the perils of short-termism. And we've got to face that one. We've got to face that reality right in the face and realize that all the money's going into the short term, not into the long term. So I'd like to start out by saying I think we need to have a massive increase in government funding of research. Why do I say that? Whatever they have it privately funded, yes. But basic research today, the Bell Labs of the world don't exist anymore. And so I think the government's got to step up to that. Penny and I have seen in the area of health what it's done in the National Institute of Health and how they funded great universities and great institutions around the United States and done some breakthrough kinds of things and spawned lots and lots of companies. So I'd like to see a National Institute of Energy that parallels that. Why shouldn't we have something focused on renewable energy, doing the basic research? I serve on the board of Exxon. Exxon, in my mind, is one of the great companies in the world, but they're not doing that kind of basic research. They're going to come out that can spawn all kinds of companies that then translate that research into practical application, into products, into things that can change human life, that can change our environment, that can change the use of energy on our planet. And also provide the funding that universities need, because universities are now taking the role of the industrial labs. Now that certainly does not eliminate the need for industry doing research. In fact, what I think it does is it opens up the opportunities for great institutions like Georgia Tech to provide deep partnership with industry counterparts, where they're taking the research done here, maybe funded by the government, maybe funded by them, and translating that into products that can be commercialized. Now, I have to say that that means you have to have an assumption that the university really wants to do that. So when I'm saying that, I like to ask you, think about how many companies ever came out of Berkeley, one of the great universities of the world. I can't think of hardly any. Think how many came out of Stanford. Think of all those companies in Silicon Valley that all came out of Stanford. Why? Stanford facilitates that. Medtronic bought a couple of companies, one of them from a guy named Tom Fogarty, who's a cardiac surgeon. He does surgery at Stanford. He's gone out and founded 5 companies. The guy's a serial inventor. Stanford says, fine, go away for a year, come back, and we know eventually you get a lot of money to Stanford. So I think it's how do you think about the technology that comes in? Do you want to hoard it? Do you want to keep it? Or do you want to get other people to create businesses around that you can see great things and they really want to work with you? And I think Georgia Tech being so industry friendly, it's always been industry friendly. That's not new. But we've now got the great graduate school of the world here that we can use that to really team up. So I'd like to suggest that we do that. The third thing, I think we're going to have to see a lot more venture capital funding. Right now, all the money's going to hedge funds. Look, you can make a lot of money selling things short. If you were smart enough to sell oil short, when it was $147 a barrel in June of 2008, it wasn't very long ago, you could ride all the way down to 33. You made a heck of a lot of money. But how did you benefit the economy? Because for every gain you made, somebody was on the losing end of that trade. We're just swapping gains and losses. Even the subprime mortgages, they thought they made a lot of money, but it all came back to bounce with bad mortgages. So I'd like to ask, how can we shift more money into things in the future and get some patient capital out there? One of the ways to do it is change the tax laws and to give capital and focus. See, our economy is so focused right now on a consumer-driven, cheaper spending economy. But when you've got 12 credit cards, you don't have a job, I can guarantee you're not going to go out and buy a new house or a new car, even if they're offering incentives. And I think we really have to shift that focus to an investment economy, investing in the future of the country, and say we're going to do the long-term thing. And then we need to align the incentives for the long-term things. It's no different in medicine. We need to align the incentives, not with just fixing disease that already exists, but keeping people well. And so I'd like to see a lot more money go into venture capital, because I think the great wealth creators are all long-term producers. Wouldn't you have been like the venture capitalists that started Intel, put initial money into Google, put the initial money into Genentech? Can you imagine how well you would have done? These are the great wealth producers of my lifetime. It's not the, believe it or not, it's not the hedge funds on Wall Street, even though it creates a lot of personal wealth. And I think there are ways we can do that. I think we also need, frankly, to shift our whole focus. The stimulus package has been aimed at very short-term gains, road construction. Why not put it into R&D tax credits to a much greater amount? Why not stimulate a real revolution? And I think what this is really going to take is leadership at all levels. It's going to take leadership from the President of the United States. It's going to take, I'm not too optimistic about congressional leadership. It's going to take leadership from the great universities. It's going to take leadership from the great corporate leaders. We're going to step up and call for this. Because really, literally, the future of this country depends upon creating an innovation economy in which people are turned around about innovating and creating new companies that we can then, we should not punish companies for going global. I'll tell you, we ought to reward them, because that's going to turn everything around to take our great technologies and ship them around the globe. So the younger people in the audience, this is your opportunity to see this crisis as your opportunity to really become a transformative leader in the fields you do. And I think, please disabuse yourself of the notion that you have to be a vice president or director or a manager or a CEO to have power. If you have personal power, you have the capability. Leadership is your choice, not your title. You don't need a title to lead. You can step up and lead. The best leaders at Medtronic were people who worked in the labs, were like serial inventors. They kept coming up with ideas. They were the people who could work with the doctor and take a breakthrough idea from the doctor and bring it back to the engineer. They were the people in the production lines that could sense what real quality was and how you got it. Those are the real leaders. It's not the people with all the titles. It's the people actually doing the work. So be inspired to go out and make a difference. The great anthropologist Margaret Mead once said, "Never doubt the power of a small group of people to change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has." So instead of thinking about how can I go lobby my congressman or how can I change the government, forget about all that. Make a difference in your world. Robert Kennedy said during his lifetime 40 years ago, he said, "Few will have the greatness to bend history itself." Now maybe there's some people in this room that will bend history, like Bill Gates did. You may be that person, but most of us will not. But he went on to say that each of us can work to change a series of things in our own environment to make this world a better place. And the sum total of all those actions will write the history of this generation. And my hope for your generation is that you will make this world a better place by taking on those really tough problems, by collaborating with a group of people to use your greatest innovative, technological, creative skills, starting new companies, starting new ideas, creating new products to really make a difference. And that will not only give you great opportunities in your lifetime, but will also restore the United States supremacy in the world and build a strong economy, and that jobless rate of 17% will be back down to 3 or 4%. And we can say with pride that we really made a difference in the world. No single one of us is going to change the world, I'll guarantee you, much as we might want to. The problems are really tough. But I think each of us can work to change a series of actions, as Kennedy said, to make a difference in the world. And as a result, the world will be a better place. So think about the legacy you want to leave behind. Now is the time to get going on it, and you can make your contribution to make this a better world. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bill. Plenty of time for Q&A, and there's people with microphones. We appreciate everyone using a microphone.
Yes.
Person back there, get a microphone to that young man.
Here you go.
Hi. So basic research is something that my friends and I have talked about a lot. Do you think the real value in it is the fact that, for example, government-sponsored basic research, is the real value that it's open to everybody and everybody can benefit from the use of it? Or do you think it's important because it's not specifically directed towards some sort of purpose and therefore can be used for lots of potential applications like you mentioned in the laser back today?
The question is, basic research is important because it's open to everyone, or because it's focused. I think basic research is important because that's how you solve basic problems. The problems we're talking about that are intractable are not solved easily, and the engines of innovation are built upon sound research technology. You don't do things like put a person on the moon. You don't create an internet without the underpinning research. You may have the application of the internet. It may take you 25 years to get there, but you need that basic core underlying research. You don't come out with a great biological drug or genetic breakthrough. You sequence the human genome because then that can open up all kinds of fields of research that can take that idea and apply it to human problems. And as I think about the great human problems, an awful lot of them require these kind of solutions. There are people problems out there, which we need to collaborate as people and as leaders. But I think a lot of our problems, we need creative new technological solutions that can make a difference about how we work together as people. Like what solutions we can have to tough problems, like renewable energy right now. It's not competitive in most fields, so we can't just subsidize it forever. We have to have breakthroughs, and I think those breakthroughs will be there in renewable energy to replace oil and natural gas. I say that sitting on the board of Exxon. I think those breakthroughs will be there. Now, they may come in chemicals, by the way. It may come in a different form. It may not be what you're thinking about today at all. But without the basic research, you won't know. You won't have that opportunity to do that.
Thank you.
Yes.
There's a recent trend in online technologies for the freemium model. You see that extending to
Online technologies for what?
like the freemium model, they offer the service for free and then start charging later for it. Do you see that extending to other areas of technology?
I'm not sure what you mean by premium model.
Freemium, they offer you the service for free and then start charging you later for it. That kind of model for business. Do you see that extending to other areas of technology, or is it just that?
Well, I think, how we monetize technology is a whole question. And, when Amazon first started losing a lot of money talking about eyeballs, you see Google giving all their services away, things being, or Skype essentially being for free. I think the business models need to be creative too about how we generate and turn these things into business. But I think the key is doing something that's a breakthrough for people and how they use it provides genuine value. When you create that value, then you'll have a business model that can recognize that value and monetize it. If you start the other way and you say money goes to monetize, you probably won't get there because you won't have the patience or the time to do the breakthrough kinds of things or to do the radical things. I mean, some of these things I've seen, I think are just crazy. How can you make any money off Skype? We use it all the time with our grandchildren. But hey, I talked to John Donahoe of eBay, who owns Skype. They're making a lot of money off it now. It surprised me, even though it's a free service. So. Yes?
Can you comment on your views on the future of innovation in healthcare in our country, given what's going on in Washington with current healthcare reform and possible changes in the FDA, tougher regulatory environment, that sort of thing?
Yeah. Well, yes, I have maybe two strong views on this. We could have a whole different talk on that. My lesson number 3 from my book is dig deep for the root cause. The root cause in healthcare. Yes, I want every person living in this country to have access to healthcare, quality healthcare. But that's just one piece of the puzzle. We can't get there from here unless we look at the puzzle. 70% of all the healthcare costs in this country come about from lifestyles, from unhealthy lifestyles. Until no one's going to talk about that, it's politically incorrect. I'll talk about it. We need to deal with unhealthy lifestyles. And the only person who can take responsibility for your lifestyle is you. No one can take, I have a friend who's chemically dependent. He's a member of AA. He says the only person keep me from drinking is myself. Because even my wife can't, because I can hide the bottle under my desk, So I think we need to focus on healthy lifestyles in this country. That's the only way we're going to solve the cost problem. And we have an epidemic going across the country that's going a lot worse than swine flu in unhealthy lifestyles. And that's why we just need to get to prevention and wellness. I think we need the president to take the bully pulpit, and I'm very disappointed he hasn't done that. I think there's a lot of ways to improve quality in healthcare, and we need innovation to do this. I think the dumbest idea I've heard yet coming out of Washington is to put, this happened in my old industry, to put a $40 billion tax on medical technology innovation. I mean, that's about the dumbest idea I've ever heard. We're going to tax, that's like biting the hand that feeds you. This is the future. We need innovation to save money, to save costs, to provide help to people so that they don't have to be in hospitals. You don't want to be in a hospital for a long time. So I think there are great opportunities, but we're not really addressing the real problems. And we're not willing to see how long it's going to take to do that. But we better get on with that.
Back there?
I have a question. How do you change the mentality of venture bankers? You say,
I'm sorry, can you repeat?
you said that you need more venture capital. But how do we change their mentality in creating technology myself? I've seen that they have a very short-term span in their funds, so they want profits really fast. And what happens is that these technologies are really breakthrough. They bring a lot of questions to the FDA, have longer approval processes. So they're not willing to fund it. If you go to a venture bank nowadays and you say, I have this product, it's great, but it's PMA, they'll just send it away.
And particularly for either original startups or early stage startups, it's very hard today to get funding. And I was talking to a young man I've been working with, mentoring, and he will ready to start a company, and the people are telling him, well, you just flip it in 3 years. Well, think how much money would have been lost if Google got flipped in 3 years, or Microsoft or Intel. I think President Obama, during his campaign, when he was Senator Obama, had a really creative idea that never has seen the light of day in Washington. And that was to say that if you found a company, or if you invest in a startup company, the first time it's sold, there'll be zero capital gains tax, which would be a great incentive to holding the company until it gets to maturity. Look how long Google held and how much wealth was created because they held out for a long time. So I think this quick hit is part of the problem. These quick money that you got to turn everything in 3 years. You can't really bring anything to maturity to realize anything close to its true value in that period of time. And I don't care what your finance professors tell you about that you can calculate all the stock price. It doesn't work that way. And so I think we need to change that, and we need to put the incentives right out there. That's why I want to change the capital gains laws too, to put the incentives. If you hold things for 7 to 10 years, you get zero capital gains tax. I'd much rather do that. And put the incentive about investing in the economy, not just to have a consumer-driven spending economy. And we're still falling prey to that, I'm afraid.
I just have a quick question. How
Yes.
can you take an idea and evaluate that idea and build a vision out of it? And then once you build the first step of building a vision, how can you take from the short-term vision into the long-term vision? Like, for example, start with an idea, and then it goes from the vision of building,
Right.
and then taking that to the next level from quick to great.
Well, how can you take vision from a short-term vision and morph it into a long-term vision? Look, I think the greatest learning we can all have, and I hope you're willing to do it, is learning through failure. Most of the great breakthroughs, if you think about clinical trials in pharmaceuticals, they really don't teach you anything if it's successful. You just prove what you already know. In fact, it's the failed experiment in the lab. But the best learning can be the failed experiment in the marketplace. But then you have to be quick adapters. We all have to be fast adapters. Say, well, this version 1.0 wasn't quite what we wanted. We have to adapt that, and we have to change it. Medtronic's brought out a lot of products. When I first got to Medtronic, the implantable defibrillator, which today is a $5 billion business for Medtronic, and I can tell you the founder, the inventor of the implantable defibrillator worked for Medtronic, and the company had such arrogance long before I came there to actually pay him $250,000 to leave the company. So he went off and competed with Medtronic until he died. But the first version I saw was about like this. You're going to put this thing in your heart and say, this is crazy. Now it's about like this, okay? That's technology evolving, getting better and better, and treating more disease aspects of heart disease. You know, it's an evolutionary thing, and we think we have to have that tolerance. So sometimes what you think your vision is will change. Even if you have a long-term goal, how you get there is definitely going to change. I think we have to have the tolerance for that. We're willing. I always say to people, get out into the marketplace, learn from your mistakes, bring out something that becomes a winner, then improve upon it. Get better and better and better. You know, that's what's happened with things like cell phones, for instance. You know, that's what happens with the personal computer. It happens almost every area of technology. People in the drug business say that's not true. You have the perfect chemical compound, but you know, they haven't created many blockbusters lately because they aren't willing to try things with smaller patient groups.
Another question out there?
Yes.
Let's get a microphone there.
So, do you see any changes in patent law which may lead to innovative companies?
Changes in?
I mean, patents. So, to make idea,
Yeah. Well,
to transfer to money, you need patent. So, do you see any changes which may lead in the right direction?
I question, do we see any change in patent laws? Yeah, I'd like to see courts enforce them. I'd like to see a global patent law, so it's enforced all around the globe, which will be hard to get to, but I think we need to work towards that around the globe, so our patents are enforced around the globe. I think the 17-year patent period is just fine. I don't think we need more than that. The problem is that we have is that when the FDA is so slow, say, on approving a medicine and doesn't give you the right to commercialize it soon, that there's such a long gap between the time you make the invention and you actually get to market that makes a very short period of time you can monetize the value. So right now, considering some extender periods, and I think that is a reasonable thing to do if whatever set of regulations you have deters the commercialization of that fundamental idea. But I also believe from one patent, you build a whole series of patents, you build intellectual property, and then you have a right to monetize that.
While the microphone comes to
Terry. Okay.
You talked about changing the culture of population and society. How about changing the culture of banks?
Well, Bob's question is how do we change the culture of medicine? Yeah, I think it has to change from paying people to keep who are diseased to paying people to keep them well. We need to realign incentives in medicine. Right now, if you keep people well, you go out of business. Any of the great medical institutions that just keep people well don't make any money. The incentives are all misaligned. If you take 2 Medtronic stents and plant them in your heart, and they fail, and then you do it again, and they fail again, and you do it again, you'll get paid 3 times. That's not right. You know, we need to keep people healthy so they don't have to go in for any kind of heart procedure in the first place because of exercise, diet, meditation, stress reduction, and all those things we know we should do. You know, not smoking, et cetera, drinking alcohol, moderation, all those things. I think we need to change the culture of people, but I think the incentives need to be realigned. That's not happening now. And that definitely needs to happen to trigger this kind of total different look. And that's the only way we're going to get at cost aspects as well. But that also requires the president to use his bully pulpit. He has to use that more than he actually has to pass a lot of laws because he has tremendous power. You know, he's used the bully pulpit very effectively in global relationships to change the relationship between the U.S. and other countries. He can do the same things to change Americans' views of their own health. Right now, the view is, look, somebody else will take care of my health. That's just nonsense. You know, why would you get sick, have a heart attack, and then say, okay, I'm now going to take care of my health? Wouldn't you want to take care of it from the get-go? And, you know, there's a lot of indication these things start very early. So if you think you're young and macho and you can't have a health problem for another 30 years, forget it. You're just planting the seeds right now. You can stay very healthy. And you can live, the younger people here can live to well over 100, you know, and have a very long, healthy life. But you don't want to live to over 100, you know, in a nursing home or in a hospital, in and out of hospital all your life. Question, Terry.
Yeah, what do you think the responsibility is of universities, and maybe even K through 12, in terms of increasing the capacity of increasing our capacity to create the world you're suggesting, and I would suggest that we want to live in?
What's the responsibility of universities and even K through 12 education to create this situation? Well, I think that K through 12 education has to prepare people for the future. Not everyone in the world should go to Georgia Tech. Not only are they not qualified, nor should they. You know, I think everyone has to have capabilities. But I think education needs to prepare, teach you how to learn. Because the kind of things you're learning are going to be obsolete. Look, I learned some great things when I was here. I was so excited, you know, about linear programming, about operations research. You know, time passes on and things move. And so you have to have the capacity to learn. And I think that's really what great institutions are doing. But I think we ought to also provide for lifelong learning. The idea that your education ends at 22 or 24 is nonsense. The world's moving way too fast, and otherwise we're going to have a lot of obsolete people. We need to provide mid-career opportunities, late career opportunities for people to continue to get educated, come in and out. And that's why I think the relationship between Georgia Tech and industry, to its graduates, to other people who want to come here, is extremely important to keep that going. There's a lot of learning intergenerationally. Like, I learned so much from my students. My philosophy is I never walk into a classroom. A professor, a friend of mine, told me this. I never walk into a classroom unless I genuinely want to learn from my students. And I'll tell you, I learn a lot more from them than they'll ever learn from me.
So you made an excellent case for long-term thinking and long-term investing, as well as converting our economy to innovation economy. So the question is, are you optimistic we'll get there?
I'm optimistic we'll get there. No, we got a long way to go. And I think we got a long way to go just to get started, just to get to the starting point. Because there's so much running the other way. Actually, you know, I am hopeful that this Wall Street meltdown will result in a great awakening, that we can't depend upon Wall Street. Look, I go there all the time, so I can't say I'm free from that. But I think it will result in a great awakening. That's not working for us. The way we're going is heading towards destruction. And sometimes you need a crisis to wake up, to see that the way we're going is a disaster. So I think that it's going to take a coming about, and things may have to get worse before they get better. You can say things couldn't be any worse. Actually, they could be a lot worse. And I think we're going to have to recognize that. And then we're going to need leaders to step up, like the people in this room. That's why I'm urging people. Step up and make a difference. Don't just run to Washington and lobby your favorite senator or congressman or write a $500 check. Don't do that. Work, make a difference right in your own environment, and that'll make the difference. If you want to change healthcare, change it in your system, in your practice, in your medical institution. If you want to make a difference in energy, don't just complain about other people, what they're doing and how they're, actually go out and create something that makes a difference in renewable energy or any field you want to take. So one more question.
There, you've got the microphone.
Okay, just speak up and I'll hear you.
Okay. You mentioned the $500 check, and I'm interested in hearing your point of view on one of America's greatest strengths, which is generosity and the philanthropic foundations of our country. How does philanthropy help build the innovation and market?
Good. I just let my wife talk about this because she's devoting herself to now running our family foundation. I think philanthropy is what somebody once gave me the phrase, so I'm going to steal from them and say, philanthropy is the passing gear of society. It's the thing to make the investment, to give the down payment that others can jump in and do. Look at what the Gates Foundation, maybe that's an extreme example. Look what they're doing now to make the down payment now on things like eradicating malaria in Africa. And many times philanthropic grants make a difference that someone will come in behind and pick up, or society, or will create a business model that really makes sense. We've tried to do that in our own family foundation for integrative medicine. Or we're trying to do it in leadership. If you can help the great future leaders of the world grow, they can make a huge difference. So I think philanthropy can make a difference in starting new creative things that others don't want to take on. The idea that you're going to have to put a P&L against every new idea is going to kill a tremendous amount of creative ideas. And, philanthropy is what got Teach for America going when a lot of people were trying to kill it. The educational establishment was trying to kill it. And had not been philanthropy, there had been no Teach for America. I think you can look at so many creative ideas. As philanthropy got them started, somebody else came in and picked them up and ran with them because they saw that creativity. So I think it can be a very nice counterpoint to looking to other sources of funding. Like right now, we're way too dependent on government funding to do everything for us. We got to get away from that. The only real jobs that are going to produce real income net after all government funding are ones that private enterprise. So we got to get people creating those private enterprise jobs. And and getting all the support networks, the university support networks, the philanthropic support networks, the government support network, supporting that basic engine of America, which there's no capitalistic machine like this one anywhere in the history of the world. Thank you all very much.
Don't leave the podium. I want Allina to come up, and also Terry, I want to thank you for allowing us to host this event here in IBD. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Terry.
Bill mentioned his wonderful partner in life, Penny George, so we want you both up here, and I'm going to turn this over to Allina.
So just as a token of our appreciation, we